done for me lately? It's Coons. What have y'all done for us lately? And if there's no answer, the only thing we owe them.
Well.
Hello.
Welcome. I know it's been a while for our audience to have my friend, my sister, our resident professor here, and it's great to have this conversation. One of the things, and I'll get to it, that Sister Drea and myself, we wanted to have this conversation about the documentary in reference to the 20-year anniversary of Katrina, come hell and high water. And it's a couple documentary. I know Ryan Coogler has one out as well, and I didn't get the opportunity to watch that one, unfortunately. And we scheduled the show behind the scenes, and I didn't even promote the show. And then the unaliving of Charlie Kirk, and we'll discuss that towards the end of our review of this documentary that's happened to be on Netflix, and give some perspective on what we think about the documentary. What have we learned in 20 years since Katrina? I'm in the business of infrastructure, disasters. So when things happen naturally, for those that support the channel, sometimes we have shows scheduled and you'd be like, damn, why they cancel the show? I particularly work in bad weather. So I kind of know about some of the things that happens in the background, definitely when it comes to FEMA, and understanding what happens when they have a natural disaster. I don't know a lot from experience, but I know enough where I can give some insight about where we are now, 20 years later from Katrina, and why that happened. I live very close to a shoreline. The town that I presently live in, way before I got here, it was flooded. The Army Corps of Engineers had really built up the dam area. So when we talk about Katrina, we talk about that as well, and getting some understanding of definitely where we live at. And Drea and myself are both homeowners, understanding your insurance policy. It's a whole bunch of stuff that we can have with this discussion. And I hope there's some of you guys in the chat that may be watching. Speak on your personal experience and what you may know about it, and be able to give us some insight about what you know. Definitely, if you live in that bayou area, Dre is not too far from there. She understands about low-lying areas. So we're gonna have a discussion. So what's up, Drea?
What's up, Q? What's up, everyone? It's good to be back.
Yeah, it's been a minute. So
Yes.
we have this documentary, and I'm gonna say what they said, and give it some context. We survived Katrina, but we didn't survive the levees.
Mm-hmm.
And understanding the makeup, which, I went to school in North Jersey, but I always understood the makeup of New Orleans. I always understood my grandmother. She was a big into the Elks. So they partied hard
Mm-hmm.
at one time, definitely the early 80s. And one of the places that she partied when I was a kid was New Orleans. Uh, Understand that New Orleans is a soup bowl. It's literally underwater. Like, you go places and you go high elevation. I know a lot of people that live in certain areas, you drive high elevation, you're going up the mountain, or you live in a valley.
Right.
New Orleans is a valley that's surrounded by water,
Mm-hmm.
which is very, for those that never been there, it's very uncommon to even imagine how a city could be under sea level. But it is. So you understood that in the documentary, they explained how with this type of storm coming, that you really nobody took it serious because of Ivan,
Right.
because Ivan was prior, and they felt like, oh, it's just like Ivan, we good, we could board up our house. It's just a little bit of wind, a little bit of
Mm-hmm.
water.
Right.
So they couldn't evacuate. And when you're talking about evacuating and mobilizing thousands and thousands of people, when it's like 3 or 4 exits out of the city, it's almost impossible to do. And I think that the first episode explaining weather, because what one of the things that I do with my job is that when you're checking weather, a storm literally changes within a minute. A storm could be headed and a storm could be stuck
Mm-hmm.
right over, and it could go the opposite way. It can go north, it can go south, or it
Right.
continue eastward bound. In this case, we know that some certain hurricanes go this way; they twist in the wind. Um, so, what was your thoughts about the initial first episode when they gave us the temperature of the room of that landscape?
When I watched the first episode, it brought me back to when I was in undergrad school. So it was my last year in undergrad school. So I remember a lot of my people who was from New Orleans, like, oh my God, it's a storm. And they don't take it seriously, like you mentioned. They're like, oh, it's a storm. We're gonna be good. We're gonna go party and stuff like that. So when I watched the first episode, I said, oh my God, this reminded me when I was back at Tuskegee. They wasn't prepared. It was a lack of, I feel like, unseriousness because once again, you're coming from a culture, a mindset of, hey, we done been through this before. Nothing's gonna really happen. But I don't think they didn't realize how weak the infrastructure was. Um, and just also to the failed leadership of just not taking it seriously once again. So I was just very perplexed, like, yo, this is serious because even if it's veering off to, let's say, Florida or Alabama, you still going to feel the remnants of it. Even I was 5, 6 hours away. Tuskegee's like 5, 6 hours away from New Orleans. We even had heavy winds and rainwater. I'll never forget that. So it was like, okay, if we're feeling it up here 5, 6 hours away, I know that they're feeling it in the Super Bowl. And I was just, looking at from the social work point of view of these people are lacking resources. You're talking about, at one point New Orleans was definitely Chocolate City, filled with culture. If you ever been there, surrounded by the Mississippi River. Like if you go uptown, for those who ever been to New Orleans, and then you're like got Lake Pontchartrain. You have to, if you're driving in from Alabama, if you're driving in on 10, you gotta go on the like 10-mile bridge. So if you don't like water, don't ever go to New Orleans, okay? Because if you go that way, you gotta go a 10-mile bridge. If you go, I forgot the Pontchartrain bridge, that's 23 miles. It's one of the largest bridges in the United States. So just imagine they're like, okay, y'all gotta evacuate, but it's all right. Go ahead and ride through this hurricane. How are you going to evacuate if you don't have a car? Because a lot of people did not have a car at the time. People lack resources. You're talking about a lot of people, and I'm not just talking about black and white. People live below the poverty line. Um, they had infrastructure in, the certain projects, right? And it's like, okay, we have our projects, but the water line is even increasing there. And you're talking about the lower Ninth Ward, which is right there by the levee. So just seeing all that, once again, the lack of infrastructure, the lack of urgency is very concerning to see. such a place that's in the United States, and I know we'll get into the other parts, just people not having the emergency preparedness and the logistics to, when Mayor Nagin say, okay, now we're going to mandate evacuation. How, sir? You don't have anything prepared for these people. Like, where are they going to go? And Mayor Nagin, he's a Tuskegee grad. Shout out to him. But I'm like, yeah, you wasn't prepared.
Did he pass away?
No, I think he just got out of prison because
Oh,
he got convicted of some things. So I just felt like Louisiana, the city of New Orleans, they just lack preparedness of, where are you going to evacuate these people, and the gas started running out. So it was just layers of trauma already awaiting people.
I think that. Hold on one second. I think that what that tells us, and then when you look back 20 years ago, and then you look at what happened prior to events that have happened in this country when it comes to a disaster or a state emergency. We got 9/11, you got certain things that have happened. It only gives you retrospective to what we just went through with COVID. And I know that me and you had did a show during COVID before about emergency readiness. And even if nowadays, let's just say our generation, we grew up where it was fallout shelters still around. And a lot of people in this present generation don't know anything about that. And we don't have readiness preparedness. And when you look at the documentary, you see the arrogance of leadership. You see that, and this was 3 years, 3.5, 4 years away from 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
You see the leadership not being coordinated, um, basically having a pissing contest.
Mm-hmm.
You see, and I hate to call the victims or the people affected by Katrina arrogant, but you see the unseriousness of the matter.
Right.
Because sometimes, like I know that they had the guy that was the performer, and he said he walked out the club and he seen people leaving. They were like, "What's going on?" They was like, "Oh, they're evacuating the city." And if you think about some people that were born there, they didn't even understand. Like, yo, if these levees break from the pressure, like I don't think people really overstand water.
Mm-hmm.
Water does not go nowhere. It has to find a spot to go to.
Right.
We always say the phrase "pressure bust pipes."
Mm-hmm.
That's a true phrase. It literally, with all that water pressure, no matter what you do, is have to go. It's going to have to go somewhere to go, and you see that the seriousness of the matter wasn't taken serious. Like, yo, what happens if these levees? Nobody ever, or they didn't show anybody that ever said to themselves, what would happen if these levees ever break?
Mm-hmm.
Then that means that that river is going to flood the city.
Right. Right. Because it's already in the Super Bowl as well.
Yes.
And then too, because I took my notes, the guy did mention that Dr. Ivan Van Herden, he did mention he was a hurricane expert, and he was stating like, hey, y'all need to pretty much be in compliance of these levees, and no one didn't listen to him because they're thinking, oh, that's going to be like 50, 60 years from now, not knowing it's coming soon because you got climate change is a whole nother conversation we could have too. And then in New Orleans, I've been in New Orleans a lot of times. It is hot. I mean, the heat is unbearable in August. I've been in August. I've been when it was like wintertime. The heat is just unbearable there. So you got those things in which it's already below sea level, and like you said, water. When water is gushing in, you can't control it. You're going to be swept away in the water, as we have seen. You know, when we get into more of the documentary. So it was just once again the leadership should fall on the sword for this because they was just they was last minute as well. And like you said, the people was like, we're gonna still party, we're still gonna do our thing. And New Orleans is a party city. It's a place that you go have fun. But the unseriousness, because people say, "Hey, we survived it before," doesn't mean you're going to survive this again.
So the thing, right? So they gave us like the way they did the documentaries. That's you could they set the table in the first episode, and then boom, going into the second episode, they survived Katrina.
Mhm.
Now these levees broke. Oh shit!
Right.
What I thought was interesting was when they started realizing, and our present thoughts should always be with the lower knife area
Mhm.
in New Orleans, and understanding that the levees, that water is right there.
Mhm.
Knowing, and I live a mile and a half from a major river where I told you they built up.
Right.
And even buying my home, we were assured of certain things and with insurance and stuff like that. Um, but the lower ninth, with some people live a little closer. Even where I live
Mhm.
at, I used to walk my park that I used to walk in before I moved here. I walk that park every day.
Right.
But it's over river. One day I'll post some pictures and put them on the river. I see the river every day. This one river, and it's a huge river in Pennsylvania. So the levees broke.
Mhm.
Now they're wondering how the hell did this water get into the city?
Right.
Some people are saying allegedly it was sounded like a big boom. Some people
Mhm.
think it was explosives. Now, if you ever heard anything break from water pressure, it will make a loud sound.
Right.
It's all that pressure building up, building up to cause, this breakage.
Mhm.
So in episode 2, they show how they showed how their evacuation of the city,
Uh huh.
their what they call that in-house what they call that thing when you in we're gonna be inside.
Oh, when they
We
went
had
into
it
the
during COVID.
Superdome.
Yeah, when they want you to be in the house during a disaster or something going on, I can't
Oh,
remember what it is.
quarantine, like
Yeah,
quarantine,
it's not quarantine, but
shelter in place,
shelter,
shelter in
shelter
place.
in place. That's it.
Mhm.
Excuse me. They wanted so people decide to shelter in place, and then you start realizing when you go outside, it's not raining no more. Because anybody that understands anything about a major storm, they say the calm before the storm, but
Mhm.
it's always calm after the
The
storm as
storm.
well.
Exactly.
Really, really nice. It's no more clouds. It's really sunny.
Mhm.
And like you said, New Orleans is really hot. So now we see the water rising on our streets.
Mhm. Right.
And in the documentary, they showed that, and they showed how people had to start going to roofs. I want you to explain, Drea, what did you feel? Did you feel when you watched it how the media really played a game with this?
And I had that on my notes too. So when I watched it, and like I said, looking back 20 years when I was in undergrad school, the media was actually in Central Business District. So remember how they showed where all the hotels is at and French Quarters. French Quarters and where the Central Business District, you do have water over there. But that's more of like they still are more like a higher line than like the lower Ninth Ward. So of course they're gonna what they say, play in people's face like, yeah, everything is great, we just got some rain, we got some high wind, but they're not paneling to, okay, look, this is what's going on in the Ninth Ward, and look what's going on in the Superdome. And when they panel to the Superdome, they was really, I would say, antagonize the folks there because the people didn't have no medical emergency. You're talking about thousands of people on top of each other. And like the brother had said, Shelton, the poet, was saying it reminded him of the slave ship, like one by one. They stacked on top of each other. No food, no type of resources, once again. No way of saying, hey, if y'all got folks in, I'm just going to say Baton Rouge, we can get in contact with your people. They can come and get you. And I know so many people have family in different parts of Louisiana. And the media really did a disservice to the people there because how are y'all just gonna? It's like Shake Night. You're gonna be all up in the videos, but you're not providing any type of aid resources to these people who are dying, who are dehydrated. I can imagine the stench of people not taking a bath. Everything was overflowed, because we're just hearing like, oh, they're just here. And then even to the point of when people were trying to escape to go across the Crescent City Bridge, which is to the West Bank. I know we didn't get that far, but you got the, National Guards and the police just policing and saying, hey, you can't go over here.
And that was the other thing. Like, you're trying to evacuate a city, and we have to understand during that time, the internet was still dial-up service. Amazing how technology has changed, right? And most people didn't have traditional cell phones like this. Some people still had beepers. And it wasn't, unlimited calling, unlimited text. So people didn't really mess with cell phones like that. And then you start realizing they're trying to, quote unquote, evacuate a city word of mouth. Because when the infrastructure goes, electricity goes, telephone lines go. So word of mouth was, you get to the Superdome and you head to that Civic Center.
Right.
And let alone the bridge to get to the Superdome. When you get in the Superdome, without law is lawlessness. Now the bathrooms, the facilities aren't working. And it showed how, regardless of what they say 20 years later, they were not prepared for this.
No. At all.
They were not prepared for Katrina. They definitely were not prepared for those levees. And trying to get people there and then when you get there, you have no direction. It's looting. Streets got to eat. I love to say the phrase, but it's the truth. Streets gonna eat. People gonna eat. People gonna do what they have to do to survive. And now you're telling law enforcement to stop the looters.
Right. And that bothered me because I didn't look at it as looting. These people needed to survive. You had children, you had elderly folks, you had women that was pregnant, you had people who needed medical attention, and no food, no water. Because remember, they said you couldn't drink the water, right? I still don't even drink the water when I go there. But it wasn't looting, it was survival. And we didn't mention about it took General Honore to come there and just regulate. And I'm thankful that they called him to say, hey, come down here with your troops, because I feel like if they wasn't under his command, it would have been a lot of more casualties than what we have saw in the documentary.
It's interesting that man is still with us, because he seemed like an older man then, and he's still around, still giving great advice. If you watch the documentary, still giving a good perspective. And how he, being a resident of that area from the bayou and understanding the cultural, understand the spiritual dynamic of that area. Like, why do we, and it speaks to what's going on now with the National Guard, I guess, why, when we are law enforcement, and we know how we feel as Black people dealing with the history of law enforcement in this country, why does our law enforcement, the first thing they do is have their weapons pointed towards us?
Right.
When this should have been every bit of a humanitarian, a humanitarian situation, more than when we go to other countries.
Right.
More than when we give other countries aid. As they say, when we go to wars with other countries, we're going there to liberate the people from the dictatorship. Here it is, we're on American soil, and our police, New Orleans police, basically turned against their own people that they knew. They even brought the one case where a white dude was shooting people.
Right.
As a hate crime. And
yeah.
General Honorary had to literally tell them, "Man, point them guns down, put them like ain't here for all
Mhm.
that." Mm.
And so that it took him to do that, and then also too, I was bothered by the vigilantes in Algiers Point. So a historic point of how Algiers Point, that's where our ancestors was brought to, which is kind of separated from New Orleans. So it's still in New Orleans, but you gotta take a ferry to get that. So they're like separated. And how they just shot that the black man, and I'm like, okay, first of all, what y'all doing at Algiers Point? Because it's mainly, us black folks in that community. And I mean, and the guys just gloating like, oh yeah, but she won't do that again. And it's like, once again, like you mentioned, why do your weapons have to be drawn? Because if you went to another country, you'll be sitting here giving them aid, being very kind and compassionate, and just they was not compassionate. Also too, it's like, look at the refugees, and if you really look at it from a different lens, you would think this was not even United States. You would think it's in a whole different country.
They even once the it's funny that the media, I always just marvel at what they do and how they shape narratives. Even the first initial days after the levees broke, they had to stop calling American citizens refugees because they understand that when you use these words and then you got, unfortunately, you got so many people on them rooftops, begging for help. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have our infamous brother Kanye West saying, let's face it, George Bush doesn't care about black people.
Right.
And then we understand in the documentary they showed the flyover.
Yeah, and that bothered me versus him. George was going to, let me see, Mobile's like an hour and a half, 2 hours from New Orleans, but he's just out there all in people's faces and just consoling them. And I'm all like, Mobile is, if y'all don't know, it's kind of equally dangerous. I have family in South Alabama, and I was just like, this is very interesting how in certain places on the Gulf Coast, he was just out there consoling people, but you just do this whole flyover and seem that you're concerned, but you're really not. And it took still like 2 days later for you to even do that because remember he was on vacation. Um, so I see why Kanye had made that statement, and it's just you look at it, they just didn't care about poor people, black people, elderly people, babies. And what I could say a positive point, I did like our people coming together and rescuing folks. I
Yeah.
was just like salute to them for doing that because that showed how community came together and said, hey, by any means necessary, whether we know how to swim or not or operate a boat, we're still going to rescue our people because you got to think New Orleans is very family oriented. A lot of their family are historically been there for centuries and they all live within like a 5-10 mile radius. So when they going back to the evacuation, where are they going to evacuate to if all they folks live on the same block?
And that's where we talk about the Mike Brown before our Mike Brown from Ferguson. Mike Brown, I know most people know that name. Very common name. I have a cousin named Mike Brown. Very common name. Like I said, our brother from Ferguson, his name was Mike Brown. But there was another Mike Brown that was pretty famous during Katrina, the director of FEMA,
Mm-hmm.
Federal Emergency Management Assessment or Agency, whatever, however you want to use it. And FEMA, prior to this, was never a known entity, what people thought they were. After this situation, and if you watch the documentary, FEMA got put on the map of what they don't do and what they can't do, and what you think their job is, what you not think their job is. I know from personal experience, and when we just had those floods in North Carolina, a lot of people don't know what FEMA's role is in a disaster. If you ever been in a flood, you people down there in that area, those hurricanes, FEMA, the FEMA money, the fires in Hawaii, the fires down in California, FEMA. FEMA has no money, you guys.
Mm-hmm.
President Trump wants to get rid of FEMA, and
Mm-hmm.
rightfully so. So let me just tell you what happens now, opposed to the document. When they have a disaster, FEMA is the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
FEMA can only give out to each individual family as much as $600. That's all FEMA can give you.
Mm-hmm.
You guys may not realize it. It sounds crazy, but that's all they can give you is allocate $600 per person. When these disaster happens, a whole bunch of different, and this is how it ties in with the documentary, a whole bunch of different agencies kick in. When they have a disaster like this, you may have like an energy company. For example, when they had the flood in North Carolina last year, about 18 months ago, what kicked
Mm-hmm.
in? Duke Energy.
Right.
Duke Energy ran the show. Duke Energy was in charge of everything from A to Z. They
Mm-hmm.
were in charge of the infrastructure getting back together. They were in charge of hooking you up with Red Cross and Red Cross. They were in charge of everything. So this is the misconception and the reason why we should not have FEMA, in my personal opinion. But some people don't understand that FEMA can't do anything; their hands are tied. So
Mm-hmm.
in the documentary, and in the going from 2 to 3, we see that you have now displaced over 1.5 million people.
Mm-hmm.
Some people were gone in Houston for over a month and a half from their loved ones, child, parent, so
Mm-hmm.
forth and so on. What was your thoughts watching that and understanding, these people was really displaced from their kids and not even knowing where their kids was for over a month and a half?
It reminds me of the Northern Migration. And why I could talk about that because my parents was part of the last wave of the Northern Migration. They relocated. I'll say relocated to Boston from Alabama in 1970. So imagine because people have to do that. They have to leave their kids in the South because maybe the parent was about to get lynched. They have to find an escape route, out over the night. And so imagine you leaving your kids in Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, and you move into Boston, Jersey, Detroit, and not knowing what's going on with your child's not knowing what's going on with you. It reminds me of slavery as well. You're getting separated from your family. Your family could have been dropped off in Brazil. You could have been dropped off in, Sullivan Island, South Carolina. So that reminded me of just the I would definitely say what we have gone through for centuries as Black people. And just imagine in 2005, your kid is in San Antonio because I remember the young lady was saying the grandmother and the cousins was in San Antonio. You have no family there. You have no idea about the culture there. You're just there. And then you're back into another situation. They was in the Cajun Dome, and some people was, displaced to certain parts of Louisiana. So I can imagine with no resources. Once again, this is when cell phones is like call me after 9 p.m. if you have a tower. If the other person have a cell phone, I can imagine just the angst and the anxiety of like where my family is at. Going into like you mentioned about episode 3. So that just I know they brought a lot of people to Alabama. I know when I was a student at Tuskegee, a lot of students actually was transferred to Tuskegee because I was thankful for HBCUs. If you went to like Xavier or Dillard or any of the HBCUs in New Orleans, they had an easy chance to come to Alabama other HBCUs. So just imagine you're getting displaced and you don't have communication with your family.
Mm. And one of the things that's interesting is when you begin to talk about the rebuild, the rebuild of Katrina. I mean, the rebuild of New Orleans, particularly the Ninth Ward. Now we have an insurance issue,
Yes.
and it goes back to when we have our political discussion, and people don't realize it that when any political discourse or any conversation is going on about infrastructure, rebuilding, building, doing this, doing that, the one simple question that always should be asked, that most people don't ask, that most people don't realize until after the fact, is who's paying for it?
Mm-hmm.
Who's paying for it? I noticed in the documentary that because of the rich cultural aspect of New Orleans, because of the rich history, that a lot of the natives of New Orleans were upset that the question was being asked, should we rebuild the Ninth Ward? And the probability of those levees happening again is high.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Right.
not as low as people think it is because it's water.
Mm-hmm.
It's water. Those pumps were old. You're talking about billions and billions of dollars of infrastructure that to this day probably is not fixed to 100% or
Right.
to where the engineers, the Army Corps engineers, think that it's more modern
Mm-hmm.
to do. Were you shocked that they were talking about not rebuilding the lower Ninth Ward and how upset the natives would be?
No, because you got to think who resides in the ninth ward, lower ninth ward is us and people who are below poverty level, right? And that's always been historic. And just how shabby of a job that they did with those houses that they put up so quickly, and how people still had to empty out their pockets. I think it was like a few months ago in New Orleans. They had like a storm, and it still flooded the city. The city still flooded for y'all that never been to New Orleans. It still floods, and this is 2025, 20 years later. Um,
I mean,
and I think
where's the sewage water going to go?
exactly. So it's gonna go into your neighborhood. So they still, like you have mentioned, Q, like they still haven't really built the infrastructure. How do I know? I was just in New Orleans a few months ago. I've been to New Orleans 3 times within last year and this year. You would think Katrina happened last year based off of how so many things are still not built up. They have this huge hospital called Charity Hospital in Treme, which is one of the oldest black neighborhoods in the United States, full of culture. And that was one of the hospitals that pretty much service people who, once again, lack of resources. That's still not built up. When you go drive through the neighborhood, they showed that Circle grocery store. Cause I took a private tour of Treme. That's still not in use. So you're talking about a food desert. The neighborhood doesn't reflect culture. They're calling the police on folks because they're playing. It's a musical city because they're playing their saxophone. So you're talking about urban renewal, gentrification. Remember they talked about the projects, how they were still in great shape. All they had to do was probably go in and gut them, but they didn't want to bring back who. And we're not talking about race here. We're talking about classism. They did not want to bring people back who did not have the money or the resources to come back and pour back into the city. And like I said, I was just there, and you should see just going through the different neighborhoods. You're like, oh, I remember this neighborhood because I've been in New Orleans plenty of times pre Katrina. That it was a black neighborhood, it was a thriving neighborhood, and you don't see people who look like us. They don't raise the rent or mortgage 2 3 times. And when you think about it, flood insurance is very expensive. Number one, they
If you
also
can get insured.
if you get insured,
If you
you
get
can get
insured.
insured, right? Because a lot of policies got canceled during Katrina as well. Same with the fires in California.
And you
So
would literally, and even though that you may have been paying your flood insurance for 15, 20 years, because of a disaster like that, you will literally bankrupt the insurance companies, which has happened. I
hmm
know at one time, and I know this, I don't want to scare the audience that's watching, but I was hearing at one time that the government is going to try to buy all of the property on the East Coast because the flood insurance companies don't want to insure it because if something happens, then they're going to the government to try to get a bailout.
hmm
So I know it sounds far-fetched that the government will want to own the whole East Coast, but we're having so many problems with floods. Some
Mhm.
people would say it's global warming, like Katrina. It's some stuff going on down there.
Right.
I mean, in New Orleans, there's some stuff going on. I said Katrina. In New Orleans, there's some stuff going on down there. And then when you look at historically how this place is, there's no way if something happens with those levees, the lower ninth can be preserved.
Mhm.
It will continue to happen as long as those levees there because of the way that the engineers designed everything. Shout out to them for trying to
Right.
preserve that city after all these floods, and not just this flood, but the flood of the
Or
early
that.
1900s. Like
Mhm.
it, and that goes to show, like when you're planning, and I don't want to sound insensitive, you're not just thinking about now, you're thinking about generations in the future. And when you look at certain weather, you know it's going to happen again.
Exactly. Right.
So that question of should they had rebuilt the lower ninth or should they build the lower ninth, it's still on the table after all these years.
Exactly, because it was once, like they mentioned, an undesirable location, right? And that's a lot of areas where they put poor people, people of color at. I don't like to say people of color, but that's where a lot of our people, usually can buy a home there. And so it's like, should they look at the infrastructure? They should. They will have to do a lot of, I would say, tearing up and rebuilding of the lower ninth ward, right? Because once again, they tried and look what happened, and how many thousands of dollars the people have to pour back into their home, and they're just like, it's pretty much going to bankrupt them as well. So that was just a terrible thing, and I'm pretty sure that they're looking at it, but they still got their ongoing issues, and people often forget too, like the Gulf Coast and other areas of Mississippi. I graduated from University of Southern Mississippi, an hour away from New Orleans. I actually had to do a research project with the mayor of Hattiesburg, and even the poor area, West Hattiesburg, which of course poor area, black folks live there, poor white people live there. They still had blue tarps on their roof of their houses, and I went to grad school. I started grad school 2007, and it was still there when I graduated 2009. So once again, it's going back to lack of resources. People are not getting paid what they should get paid, and also too when you think about where University of Southern Miss is at. On the other side, you got Oak Grove, in which people have money and people are doing the flight moving there if they have more resources. So it's like we say, it's we can add the racism thing. It's definitely a classism thing. It's definitely an institutional thing because New Orleans has always been a corrupt city. Look what they got going on now in 2025. So they really need to hopefully do a lot of assessment, um, infrastructure building, rebuilding, and we'll see what happens from there. But I do like a lot that grassroots have also built that city too, as far as with the people coming together saying, "Hey, these are some things that needs to happen." And shout out to the brother. I gotta shout out my Tuskegee people, Fred Johnson. He has Tuskegee stuff on, and he's doing a good job too, as far as with the housing. But I'm also upset about that because they actually tore down the projects. I know in Treme, the Lafitte projects, and they made it mixed income. We seeing a lot of that too. I know I see a lot of that here in Alabama, even while I'm from in Boston. They're tearing down the projects and having this mixed income. But who can afford that if Section 8 and other, resources, federal resources are being limited?
When we talk about that area, and we had this discussion offline, when you're talking about certain areas in this country and our people, you always have to put context and understanding that, for example, a place like Mississippi that's right there, Mississippi is still being punished for the Civil War, and why the resources from the other states in the Union are not being allocated towards Mississippi because of that. And you'll be like, well, what it got to do with us as melanated folks? it has a lot to do with us with melanated folks because we were pushed to certain areas after post Civil War to low areas, and then the resources not being allocated never got to us. We know that New Orleans was once owned by the French, and it was basically just a territory that just Jefferson bought it from Napoleon and just left it the way it was.
Right.
He just wanted the space. It was just basically a land grab. So it's very important to understand, like, okay, because in episode 3, they talked about the Confederacy. They talked about historically down there and feeling a racism aspect of it, which I thought was interesting because here it is. We're talking about a documentary that should be talking about the aftermath of Katrina, but there is a racial element. There is a classism element. There is an element of, oh, they'll be all right. Or New Orleans. Most people fear New Orleans, and New Orleans is the home of conventions. So you would think with all the partying, the Mardi Gras is a cultural thing.
Right.
But most people from the outside, yeah, I'm going down to Mardi Gras to party. So if you're going to Mardi Gras to party, you may be dealing with vendors that's not from New Orleans, thinking that the money is being diverted to help the lower ninth, when in reality it's not. And if to speak to another note, there are thousands of cases, you guys, and then we're talking about the documentary, but there's thousands of cases of mismanagement of funds by our elected officials. It's not even funny how much you can just sit on the internet and find cases and cases every day of mismanagement of funds.
Right. And it's a lot of it, and I think that's why a lot of politicians, they stay in those seats because they know they go in broke and they come out millionaires and multimillionaires. And I hate to keep harping on it, but New Orleans is definitely a corrupt city. From even their power company, Entergy, is very corrupt. From their mayor office, from even the New Orleans Police Department as well. They have so many different issues, which each entity, and that's why Ray Nagin got jammed up, because he was, a corrupt politician. Even though he had the lazy affairs, like, I'm this cool dude, he was definitely all up in the videos, but he ended up once again getting caught up in that system of corruption. And another thing I forgot to mention, going back, I think it was episode 2, I was like, how FEMA's going to tell folks what to do? They was all the way in Baton Rouge. And Baton Rouge from New Orleans is about like 90 minutes. It's about like an hour and a half, 2 hours away from each other. So
I thought that was interesting when the general said, and this is what we got to understand. This is what, we call it performative politics. It's also performative media, performative narrative spinning. The general said that Mike Brown told him, that's your desk right there. So when we go in front of the media, we're a unified body. And the general was like, nah, I'm out here with the people. I'm gonna be amongst the people. The problem is not in the office at a command center.
Right.
The problem is out there in the street. And you saw after 3-4 days when he sat with Mayor Nagin, he was disheveled. He was putting to work, and he looked like he haven't showered in a few days. He didn't have his hat on, which, if you know anything about military command, they always try to wear their crown. So I thought that was very interesting. Like, it's so many lessons that should have been learned from Katrina to today that really we haven't learned anything. Because I know up north when they had Superstorm Sandy, as they say, one of the blessings in living in New Jersey at the time is that President Obama was in office. They had a Republican governor in New Jersey, and they happened to work well together. They got rid of the party line bullshit, and New Jersey residents, for the most part, got the resources that they needed. I know it's still some people that got the ramifications, but we see how during Katrina, it was not the case. You got a Democratic mayor who wields so much power in New Orleans that he may feel like he don't got to answer to a governor that governs Louisiana, but not realizing that Baton Rouge is the capital, but but New Orleans is the cash cow.
Right, it's a tourism cow. Right, exactly.
And then you have, when I want to give context to it, you have a president who most people felt was incompetent at the time, but we were in the middle of fighting a war on terrorism, allegedly, going to Iraq. So all this was going on, and everybody has an issue with who's in charge.
Right.
Or who's going to take the lead. I know one portion before we get to wrap this segment up, where Ray Nagin was like, I'm tired of all the promises. I don't want to hear nothing about promises. We need everything.
Right, right, yeah. He was fed up,
We
dude. He was like, wait a minute.
everything. Yeah, so I thought that was interesting. And we as people, those watching the broadcast, yourself, myself, people that we intermingle with on a day-to-day basis, we should ask each other, do you have an emergency readiness plan? Do you, just the basic stuff, do you got working flashlights in your house?
Right.
Do you have a first aid kit? Do you have I know in certain areas you got to have a generator everywhere. Do you have a generator? Where's your generator? Have you booted up lately? Is the gas kept outside in the safe spot?
Exactly.
If you don't own your home, what are you going to do for readiness? Do you have a plan on hotel or what you're going to do? Are you close enough to your family where you can make sure they're all right and vice versa? I know me and you, we both live far away from our immediate families. I mean, what are we going to do?
Right, exactly. And I'm thankful that I'm close, like my parents are here in Alabama and I have, both sides of my family, Georgia, Alabama, other places, but I think about, like my brother and my uncles in Boston and stuff like that. And it's like hopefully they have a plan because they only live like 15 minutes apart. But that's true. You need to have a plan with your family and say, all right, these are some things that we need, especially if you got elderly folks who have medical conditions and babies, right? You need to have, I would definitely say a generator because especially here in Alabama, like we get a lot of tornadoes, hurricanes, don't have to deal with snowstorms, but those things can knock your power out for a week or 2 weeks. So, you have to have a backup plan, a generator or something. Just be prepared, even for food and for water and, a safety, a bunker or something like that. But I don't think people think about that because they don't think, oh, I'm going to be in this situation. But I don't even think this documentary and the other ones that was on Hulu I watched too, or even when the levees broke when Spike Lee did the first one. I don't think people are really paying attention. They think, oh, that was in New Orleans. It could happen anywhere where you live at.
Anywhere. Like I said, I live in the valley. I remember one time, a couple weeks ago, we had a major flash flood. It rained like crazy for like 3 hours. So where I used to live at was flooded. Couldn't get anywhere. So I had to divert. I had to come through town a different way. And even right now, they got one of the main streets to the major hospital in this area. The street just collapsed in 3 different spots. And they've been working nonstop there. I mean, not nonstop, but basically 16 hours a day to try to get the water out of the street, people's basements flood. And I was just thinking to myself one day, I was sitting out on my porch and I was like, damn, imagine being a homeowner on that block. You probably can't even sell your house right now if you wanted to sell your house because people know about that street. So to get appraisal on your land would probably be like, you losing money.
Yeah.
You ain't gaining money. But I really thought the documentary, did a documentary. I think me and you had did a documentary before years ago. For those that don't know, Dre and myself have done a lot of different shows together, which we would call a conversation on the phone. And it's interesting that, like I said, they did this 20 years. And I think that most people, definitely for the younger people, need to look at those documentaries and really start thinking about what would they do if they're put in these type of situations. Because, like I said, FEMA only gonna give you $600. That's all they can give you.
Right. And don't forget, remember they gave some of the folks the trailers, the FEMA trailers, they had formaldehyde, they had all type of chemicals.
Yeah.
So now we're entering in chemical warfare, right? So they're just trying to figure out how to take these folks out. And people just have to forget it. I'm just gonna move or stay where I'm at, whether that's in Georgia,
and that
Texas.
goes to before we go into, we're gonna take a break and then we're gonna go into the second portion of the show. But that goes into what Drea has always said. Like, one of the things that we should get back to, definitely, you guys, is owning our own land, agriculturing on our own land, and understanding. Now, we know your own land could get flooded, but sometimes we've gotten so caught up with living on the grid that we need to know how to survive off the grid. Because at any given moment, your electricity can get shut down. Do you live by a well? Do you live by fresh water? What would you do? Do you know how to purify the water where it's drinkable enough where you won't get sick?
Right.
So with that, we're going to take a little break, like 3 minutes, you guys, and then I'll be right back. And then we're going to talk about the unaliving of Mr. Charlie Kirk. We'll be right back. We're back.
We're back.
Well, today, earlier, for most of us that know, most of us that have seen the news reports, Charlie Kirk, the 31-year-old founder of the conservative youth organization Turning Point USA, was shot and killed in Utah. He was hosting one of his events, and Charlie Kirk was a conservative um, activist. They would say a conservative activist. And we're going to talk about him because this is trending. This is a big story right now, and it's going to get bigger as it unfolds, but we're just going to touch on it. And one of the reasons why I thought it would be great that Drea touched on it and myself have this discussion is because Drea has been a college professor, understands the college, even though it was an HBCU, understands the college life because she actually taught at her alma mater. So anyway, Charlie Kirk was killed today, and Charlie Kirk's claim to fame when he would tour colleges and he would do these speaking engagement at these colleges where he would have open debates and he would call it prove me wrong, where he would debate on a few topics: race, Second Amendment, um, Christian values, LGBTQ rights. Sometimes, a lot of times, he had very, very strong opinions about racial black issues coming from a white man, which me personally, I always find interesting. And like I said, he was unalive. But Drea, what was your initial thoughts when you found out that he got shot?
First of all, I didn't know much about him, so I was like, okay. And when it says, oh, like a advisor to Trump, and I was like, oh, okay. So of course he's gonna be controversial. He's gonna be definitely out there. He's gonna speak his mind. And I was like, oh, okay. And I looked at the state, and I said, it's not by any of us because we don't live in Utah. Some of us do. It's probably by like 4%. Um, and at a college, um, I teach at two PWIs now, and they can invite anybody they want. You know, even when Tuskegee invited Malcolm X to speak, that was a big thing in the '60s. Like, how dare y'all? And that was one of his last speeches on campus. So when I heard that he was gotten alive, I said, that's interesting. And when they start, bringing a development of like, investigation of who could it be, and I seen people joking like, oh, well, it's, them on them crime, it was like a joke. But now it's getting intensified. Now I was looking on social media, people like, well, if you're not, happy about it, I'm deleting you. So it I got to a level of like, here we go with even more division. And I understand this is what this man spoke about. That was his whole brand. Everybody's on this whole brand thing. But what do you expect? As my mother says, you deal with people according to knowledge. And, that's how I take it. I do because I'm a person in which I have morals. I don't want to see anybody be unalive. Period. Whether they got an opinion that's like far off from mine, people may not like me because I have an opinion that they don't like. But does that mean that my life have to be taken away or that person's life have to be taken away? No. But this is the world that we live in. People are so unhinged that your opinion is different from mine. I'm just gonna come and dox you and come get you. And I just don't like that people are so divided. Like, oh, you, my mom, I'm cutting you off because you follow homeboy. I'm like, oh, you don't even know
You
that
know,
person, but okay.
you know, when I first I just came in from work and I seen he got shot, I went to sleep. And when I woke up, I they said he had died.
hmm
So, and if you look at, unfortunately I seen the video. And I say unfortunately because I don't need to see that.
Right.
Unfortunately, I seen the video and I was like, oh, he dead. Like he just got to be announced dead at the hospital.
Mm.
And I'm very indifferent to uh someone that has a platform I believe in objectivity. I believe that you have a responsibility when you start talking on the microphone. I believe everybody should be objective, but that's my personal belief.
Mhm.
I know what I have to. I have to be objective. I have to not get emotionally triggered, emotionally caught up in my issues. I am passionate about a lot of issues that are dear to me, but sometimes I can never give an emotional response to a serious issue because that
Mhm.
I've seen through my experience that a lot of people have gotten themselves in a lot of trouble by reacting off their emotions. So
Right.
what I wanted to discuss with you, and I had experienced and I shared with you earlier, that I literally, my quote unquote stomping grounds, as people would say, my hood is literally 15 minutes away from where our great Dr. Khalid Muhammad made his quote unquote controversial statements. And anybody that has ever understood about higher education, colleges, universities, HBCUs, uh, the satellite units to the major college campuses. I went there to party. I did never enrolled as a student. I went to college to party. I never enrolled as a student. I was in a lot of different colleges in the Northeast area to party. And those parties back then was fun. They bring back a lot of memories. But one of the things that most people may not understand about colleges is that you have a lot of different organizations in schools.
Mhm.
And when you can raise money, like a lot of younger people in higher education could do, you can literally get anybody to come and speak.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting things about Charlie Kirk was that was his platform. He went to colleges because you have some people who feel like when you go to college, you get educated. Some people feel like when you go to college, you get indoctrinated.
Mhm.
Um, I was sharing with Drea earlier, you guys, you ever know somebody that you grew up with and then they go to college and they come back and they be radicalized
Right.
in an aspect, right? And I hate to use that word because we think that it's a bad thing,
Mhm.
but you'd be like, damn, you just want to wait for a semester. Like, what happened to you? Like, what they do to you? You only went to North Carolina, dude. You ain't go nowhere
Right.
far. Like, that's you went to shore. Like, relax. So, as a professor, as somebody that taught in the HBCU and a predominantly white university as well,
Mhm.
how was that experience when you know, like you said, back in the '60s, Malcolm X was spoke at Tuskegee, your alma mater, and a place where you taught as well, and it's history that he
Right.
stepped on these grounds. Like even back then, you go back and you think about these prominent figures. We know that, and I hate to say it, well, Dr. Short explains it, the history of Howard and how all these prominent figures in our culture went to Howard.
Mhm.
So, how is it when the temperature, the atmosphere, as I like to say, know the room, when these controversial figures visit these universities?
Well, I know from an HBCU standpoint, even when I was a student, it depends on who it is, the turnout. And also too, because we had Bush come on our campus, the sun. Let me go back to my era when I was a student. Our president was very conservative, not liked, not liked at all because Black Republican, very conservative. So you're talking early 2000s when I was a student. Some of the things, his policies, mindset was not, students wasn't even rock with that. So you're talking about somebody who is governing the institution. So when I was in school, we had what's the young lady's name? Because I read her article when I was in high school, Kimba Smith, the young lady who sold, helped. They said it helped the boyfriend sell drugs out of Hampton, and she
You got
came and spoke.
you guys in the chat. Kimber Smith was a landmark case.
Mm-hmm.
If you ever look it up, Bill Clinton would not give her a pardon.
Mm-hmm.
He knew, and the feds knew that she knew nothing about her boyfriend that was selling drugs.
Right.
So in the 90s, all the way up until the early 2000s, there was a big campaign
Mm-hmm.
of college girls should never mess with street dudes or dudes that they
Right.
don't know enough about because you don't want to be the next
Yeah, the
Kimber
Kevin
Smith.
Smith.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that was controversial when I was a student because it's like she was telling her message about, not getting pardoned. This is what can happen, especially at a HBCU, blah, blah, blah. Um, a little bit of controversy because it was like my freshman, sophomore year, like, oh, these girls gonna go, like you just mentioned, date these locals, whatever the case is. But we really did have folks on campus that was very, by that time I was in school, it wasn't radicalized versus before. I mean, Tuskegee was rocking before with high power, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, to the point they had the KKK and National Guard on our campus. Like he got to get up, Malcolm X, he got to get up out of here because he's radicalizing the students. In which a lot of people don't know, Tuskegee had an uprising on campus in which they locked in the past administration. I want to say that was like Patterson and Foster. So Tuskegee has always been, as low as it is, a conservative campus. But HBCU, so it depends. Like you say, you may go down there and get radicalized. Versus, let's go to PWIs. I went to PWI for grad school. And I went to Deep South Mississippi. Okay, we don't have some folks like you inviting who, and I remember we had a lot of protests because I was part of Black Graduate Student Organization. So people who was, let's say, past grand residents of the KKK, right? But like you said, you got the Young Republicans Club, you got the Young Democratic Club, you got the Black Student Union. So whoever that, like you mentioned, can fundraise these folks to come on campus, guess what? It's freedom of speech. Let's go to present tense. I live in Alabama. For those who love the beloved University of Alabama, you had back in my parents' time in the 60s, George Wallace, who said segregation now, segregation forever, that stood in the door that didn't admit black folks there, right? And let's bring it forward to 2025. That's y'all don't know about. Um, President Donald J. Trump was the commencement speaker. They kept that so hush hush. And so one day I was watching one of my favorite news channels, and I was like, he was here in Alabama. He was a Christmas, and they had folks out there line up protesting. It was just sprinkled in there, but it was a lot of folks out there protesting. And people don't know about this because once again, it's not going to get publicized as well. And everyone's favorite, I don't want to say everyone's favorite coach, everyone who rocked with the Tide, y'all favorite coach Nick Saban, introduced him. That's his ace boom home. So people don't. I can say this because I live in a football state. People don't care about that. They're like Nick Saban's their deity, and as much people don't realize it, Donald Trump he has a low approval rate here in Alabama as well. So once again, these campuses, it doesn't matter if you are highly controversial or if you just door style. They may not. They don't care if you got the money to
And
bring
this
them in there. They're gonna bring them in there.
and this is interesting because when we talk about, and this is why Charlie Kirk, when you look at him, and I'm gonna say that I'm very indifferent towards him dying. I understand he has a family, his wife, kids, and it's unfortunate that his wife is a widow now. His kids don't have a father. But I'm very indifferent. I don't have any feelings, right, good or bad. It is what it is, and I'm not surprised. I'll just say that. What I find interesting, though, about him and how he was able to do what he did is that we very rarely hear of a white activist going to colleges and doing this. We know that colleges can be majority for the point super liberal. So when he would go to these campuses, he would basically be going, and I know it's Utah, the Mormons, but
Mhm.
you have to understand that higher learning campuses,
Mhm.
regardless of a person's values when they leave home, professors, are required to get you to critically think. So you're always going to get the opposing views. So these universities and higher education are somewhat very liberal. And we know that this has been the Republicans' fight with the DEI. So Charlie Kirk would be going into enemy territory and having these debates. And if you ever watch some of them, his points, whether you agree with them or disagree with them, you probably be like, "Oh, that's a different perspective." I didn't watch enough of them, and I probably won't. Um, he'll probably in some uh, corners of this country, he's going to be a martyr. Charlie Kirk is going to be a hero for a lot of people that have strong conservative values. And I say that to say, like, one of the things that when you get these speakers, and not just speakers that are going to doing the campus tour, but the commencement speeches. I know a guy, I don't know him personally, but I know somebody who's a football player. And, he played for Kansas City Chiefs. He went, and I'm going to explain to you guys. He went to a Christian college and he spoke out against abortion, against Catholic. It was a Catholic college where they agree with his way of thinking. Because of where we're at in our country with polarization, they basically said when reports came out that he was controversial. Not, and it lacked context that he was talking to people who were like-minded as him. Catholic upbringing against abortion. And they politicized his personal religious beliefs. And it's unfortunate that when you look at our college campuses where we are always pushing the envelope with critical thinking, thought, having ideas, having different, and we talk about this country and I hate to use their words. I hate to use the words that affected Black people, but when you speak about words of diversity, diversity in thought, diversity in opinion, so many people were threatened of Charlie Kirk. Right, wrong, and different. I'm not praising this man. But when you look at colleges, Drea, where are we going? Because we should be able to have, and we know that the person that killed him is probably going to be, I know they said they had one guy in custody, they let him go, and they probably have the other guy. And he's an older person. So it's not like he was killed, unquote, by a college student.
Right.
You know what I mean? It was somebody that had strong beliefs on what they did, and they chose to use violence to unalive him instead of being able to have a cordial discourse with him. Because at the end of the day, what I eat don't make you use the bathroom. And like you see that atmosphere, you've seen that, and you've been experienced where you've seen it get out of hand, where it gets back and forth. Explain how that them heated debates really get what you've seen.
You have the people, of course, who have the opposite opinion of that person, and I feel it's like the provocateur for the clout of the talk of the campus. And some people, that's their whole brand, is to go to these um, debates or these public lectures and just be off the wall challenging the person. And what you need to challenge is the university for bringing them there. Challenge them to change the policies. And a lot of people really get in their feelings about, I can't believe they brought this person on campus. But you need to challenge the administration, which is going to trickle down to maybe the student advisors and the student organizations. A lot of times, especially when it comes to the SGA, the Student Government Association, they can bring whoever they want on campus as long as
like I said, I never enrolled. Like I went to a business school, but I never enrolled in a college. Man, bring who you want, because I think that we do need to be able to have cordial discourse. This is one of the rights and understanding of our Constitution, and really understanding what it is to say, I disagree with you,
Mm-hmm.
boom, 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 boom. But because of this cult-like following that people have, that people get zealous. And I think, and it ties into the first portion of our show, media
Right.
and narrative plays a major role with
Absolutely.
our thought. Charlie had very, very interesting thoughts towards Black people, which I don't particularly agree with as a Black man.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes we need to face it that some Black people and some white people have never really been around each other, and they make assessments based off of what they think or what they
Mm-hmm.
heard. Or like you go into a store and you're Black and you go in a predominantly white store. You may have felt, you may, from your experience, may feel uncomfortable or made to feel uncomfortable a lot of times. So
Right.
you're taking that into the store going forward, and vice versa to a white person in the same type of situation. We sometimes don't understand that our differences is what make us all unique in our own separate way, and getting people to understand our story
Mm-hmm.
through their lens is a lot harder than understanding our own story.
Right,
Um,
exactly. And what makes me upset about this, because being a professor in the HBCU setting, especially when I was at Tuskegee, we had amazing like public discourse, especially during Black History Month. Ralph Ellison lectures. We had Malcolm X's daughter. I think I can't think of her name. One of his daughters, and people don't show up for that. They'll show up for like the controversial folks. But somebody who's like amazing, who may be an author, who may have been civil rights, who do a lot of grassroots work, they don't show up for that. And I used to have to beg my students. I'm like, I'll give y'all additional 5 points just to go to one of these lectures, and they'll be like, why? But y'all show up for something controversial so you can have social media talking points. So it's like I think people need to. It's the whole like rage bait. Like what we're gonna be triggered by today, and what I'm seeing on my timeline, people being triggered by something that they probably don't listen to this man, never even heard of him. Like I said, I barely even heard of him. So I was like, oh, let me do some
you
research.
know, you
Oh,
know,
okay.
it's funny. It's funny when you think about it because him, Nick Fuentes, and Ben Shapiro. I used to get all three of them mixed up. They're very different. They're very
Mhm.
different in their opinions, and sometimes we get so concerned with, like I said, with trying to get other people to understand our situation in our lens, and our lens wound up getting cloudy trying to focus on convincing someone else to view it the way we may view certain things, definitely when it comes to race in America.
Mhm.
So going forward, we know that it's going to be a lot of stuff in the next couple of days with politicizing maybe his murder. Um, whether people want to view him as a politician, we know that he had the ear of the president.
Mhm.
So much so that the Republicans wanted to do a moment of silence on the House floor,
Mhm.
and the Democratic Party started booing and saying no. I mean, right, wrong, or indifferent. Where's the civility? Like, I'm not saying they should have. I'm not saying they shouldn't have. But
Right.
like, what are we doing here? Like,
Mhm.
what are we doing? And the role that our politicians play with inciting this type of behavior, because at the end of the day, whether they realize it or not, um, they they incite this type of vile back and forth. This one and that one is an enemy to democracy or an enemy to the country. They're vile. I will say this: Charlie Kirk was an advocate of 2A, and I fully agree with him.
And I'm
So
even seeing quotes about like die by the gun, something,
yeah, yeah,
that quote. I'm like,
you see a lot of people saying it was his karma because he was a 2A advocate, which is weird, but you're entitled to believe as long as you don't hurt or harm anyone physically or their property. You're entitled to have your own opinion, and your own opinion is your opinion. I won't say all opinions are like assholes because you're not an asshole for your opinion. Your opinion is valid, and your opinion needs to be heard because everybody has one. But that's all we can offer tonight, and great conversation. I'm putting you on blast right now. Will we see you more often?
yes, you will see me more often. So I miss you guys, and I just have to put myself back out there.
Yeah, I'm gonna hold you to that. I'm gonna hold you to that. Appreciate everybody in the chat for joining us. Sister Star, if you're still there, thanks for watching us again. Thanks for always being supportive of what we do. And until then, you guys take care. Remember, like, share, subscribe, support what we're doing. We'll see you guys again soon. Take care. Have a great night.
Bye.